Hey guys, this is going to be my December wrap-up and January TBR, where I go through the books that I read in December and tell you really quickly what I thought about them, and then go through the books that I plan to read in January. And I actually read 9 books so far in December, but there is actually one book that I'm currently reading, and because I'm filming this with a couple days left in December, I think I'm going to finish it before the end, because I think right now I have like 5 chapters in the epilogue left, and I have like 3 days of the 2.5 technically, when I'm less than that I guess, because I'm filming this somewhat late. I'm filming it like right after dinner, but still I'm gonna read more of it today too, so I think that I will be finished with it, which will put me up to 10 books this month. I'm gonna go ahead and include that in the wrap up because I already know what I'm gonna rate it, unless something like huge changed in my mind at the very end, and I don't think that's going to happen. So let's go through the books that I've read in December. The first book I finished this year was A Short Introduction to the Hebrew Bible by John Collins, which was one of my theology textbooks for my Old Testament class. It's surprising to me that I actually read the whole thing cover to cover, I think, through the semester, not in really like a sort of just read it all the way through sort of way, but I read it as we were going through class, and I actually found it way more interesting than I would have expected. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. As far as, this was my second theology class, because at my school we have to take 2 to graduate, and my first theology class, all of the textbooks were really boring, and in this class they were all better than in my previous class, but this one was definitely the one that was like easiest to read. Like, it was just very written in a very I don't want to say simple in that it makes it sound like it's dumbed down or something, but just in an easy to read sort of fashion, and I actually found it interesting. And then I read The China Mirage, The Hidden History of American Disaster in Asia by James Bradley, which I believe I did a video review on here of, but I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Like I said in that review, this kind of covered a period of history that I had a bit of vague knowledge about, but something that I didn't know about that well, and I really enjoyed reading more about it and hearing more about it, and kind of the focus on an area of history that I don't feel like gets focused on as much. And I thought it was a really great book, and also written in a way that's very easy to read and kept your attention and was entertaining and things like that. Then I read At the Scent of Water by J. Gerald Jansen, which was another textbook from my theology class. I give it 3 out of 5 stars. It specifically focuses on the book of Job and kind of the author's own experience with it, because apparently he wrote a big commentary on Job before writing this book, and then he got diagnosed with cancer, and kind of his experience with cancer kind of influenced how he looked at the book of Job afterwards. So he kind of wrote the book about his new kind of outlook on it after the cancer diagnosis and going through that and things like that. And then there was Deal Breakers by Laura Lee, which I gave 1 out of 5 stars and did not actually finish. I got about 60% or so of the way through, I think. I got this book for review and was interested mostly because it was my first experience with new adult, so not YA, but for kind of books marketed towards college age, which is what I am and whatnot, but yet I hadn't read any new adult yet, even though it's become a thing. I kind of feel like it's dying down now though, it was a very short-lived thing. But it was the first new adult book that I have read, and it was not a good experience. Mostly because I read, within the first chapter, I was aware that I was probably not going to finish the book, because the male romantic lead, whose name Riley, I think he was Riley, was just so obnoxious and terrible, and I think the author was trying to make him a believable college student and whatnot, but it was overboard, just terrible, the most obnoxious person ever, and I kind of feel like it crossed the line between believable level of obnoxiousness, because he's immature and whatnot, which would have been okay in certain levels, but it like passed that and it was just like, I can't deal with him. And then you have a time skip. And I was hoping that after the time skip things would be better, and they were in comparison. He was a little bit better, like a little bit more grown up because he was an adult now and everything. But I still feel like he like had this sort of obnoxiousness in him. Maybe it was just distaste from how he'd acted earlier, like carrying over. But I didn't like it. I don't want to go too much into spoilers, even though I think reading the synopsis that the publisher wrote and everything already kind of heavily hints at what the book hinges on, the like point of it and everything. But I don't want to like spoil that anyway. But I'm just gonna say that it did not feel very believable to me. It just, like, I had a hard time believing it. And that coupled with the fact that I really hated Riley, but I kind of disliked all of the characters in the story for different reasons that I kind of went into in my review. And I don't want to start ranting about it now. The review's on my blog, and like, I really kind of got a bit more into dissing the book than I had planned when I wrote that review. So I talk quite a bit about several different negative points in the book for me in that review, and I'll refrain from going into all of it again. I finished Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince by J.K. Rowling in my Harry Potter reread. If you remember, I was rereading Harry Potter, and then I finished Order of the Phoenix when I was at school before Thanksgiving break, and I had forgotten to bring Half-Blood Prince with me, so I didn't have it, so I immediately started reading it over Thanksgiving break, and I finished it earlier this month and gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was already 5 out of 5 stars beforehand, but I re-rated it, I guess, 5 out of 5 stars. And obviously I love this book, and I'm another step closer to being finished with my Harry Potter reread, which I think has been going on for, well, I don't even remember, since the summer at some point, and I can't remember when in the summer. And now we get into the period of the month where I read book about North Korea after book about North Korea. If you watched my wrap-up in TBR from last month, I kind of explained how I wound up with 3 different books on North Korea, but long story short, I had to write a paper about Korean music for school and couldn't find enough books in the school library, so then I had to go to a bookstore, and the bookstore only had books about North Korea, and so I wound up with all of these books for that paper, and then I wanted to actually read them because North Korea is fascinating in a really terrible way. So I read all of those books back to back, and the first one that I read was Dear Leader, My Escape from North Korea by Jang Jin-sung, which is a book by a North Korean defector, and he was high-ranking in the party. He was one of Kim Jong-il's, I think it was Kim Jong-il. I will admit that occasionally I still get their names confused. Like, I have it down, but then I second guess myself, but I think Kim Jong-il, he was one of Kim Jong-il's admitted, which means that, like, he had met Kim Jong-il, he ate dinner with him, and kind of had a certain level of protection on him because of that, because the other people in the party couldn't really touch him without permission from like really high up, possibly Kim Jong-il himself, to punish him for anything he did. So he had that level of protection that he couldn't be punished as easily as everyone else. And he was a writer. He wrote poetry praising the Kim Jong-il or Dear Leader, and that was his job. And then he works in a special agency that and I still have to review this book, so I shouldn't really go into a lot of detail, but I love talking about these, so probably going to. He worked in a certain committee, or I can't remember what it's called, where the counterintelligence agency, they have like a proper name for it, but I can't remember what it is, where they kind of review information from like South Korea especially, but from the outside, and kind of read what they're saying, and then they kind of manipulate that sort of thing, and information from the outside for the North Korean people. And because of that, the author of the book had a look into information from the outside and from South Korea that normal North Koreans didn't, and it causes him to start questioning what he's doing and things like that. And eventually, him and a friend escape. They cross the border into China, and this book starts off talking about his life in North Korea. Talks about how he reached the level in the party that he did, and talks about the work that he was doing in North Korea, then talks about how he becomes disillusioned and how he kind of starts learning the truth. And then it goes into detailing how they got to South Korea eventually. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say he got to South Korea, considering he wrote this book, and his author bio on the back says that he now lives in South Korea. So it's a very, very interesting story. It's the first thing I've read that's written by a North Korean defector. It was written in Korean. This is translated. It's a really great book. I would really recommend it. I think it does a really great job of showing life in North Korea, since it is written by a North Korean, and it's just a really moving story. And then I read The Impossible State, North Korea, Past and Future by Victor Cha, who I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and the author of this book used to work in the White House as the director for Asian affairs, so he kind of dealt with everything, dealing with North and South Korea and China and Japan, or I know North and South Korea, then I think either China or Japan. I think it might have been Japan, I don't know, but he worked kind of on that area and kind of briefing the president, George W. Bush at the time, about issues and things concerning that, and was his advisor. So he has visited North Korea, and it was kind of his job basically to be up to date on everything that North Korea was doing. So I think this is definitely more political than this one, and that this is a personal story, and this is focusing on North Korea kind of politically. It talks a lot about kind of how North Korea does business, how North Korea interacts with other governments, because he had to work directly with North Korean government officials at different points in time, working on trying to get different agreements made. So we talked about how difficult they could be, and how North Korea goes about international communication and everything completely different than everyone else. At one point in the book, he talks about how China and North Korea are supposed to be allies, but when they were at talks with the United States, South Korea, North Korea, and China, there would be times where the Chinese and North Korean representatives would go off in another room to talk, and the American and South Korean representatives could hear them screaming at each other in the other room, which is interesting. So stuff like that, kind of more the political side, and also North Korea's methods of controlling its people and things, which is definitely in this, but again in a more personal way. And this is more an analytical kind of look at what North Korea is doing, and it was very interesting, and I would also highly recommend this if you're interested in that sort of thing, and a more kind of detailed, here's what North Korea has done and what they're doing. He also kind of speculates on the future of North Korea. And the last book on North Korea that I read was Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Lives in North Korea by Barbara Dimick. This is kind of like this book, and that is far more about personal stories. The author is American, but she lived in South Korea as a journalist for, I cannot remember what paper she worked for, but she worked for, Los Angeles Times. She was a correspondent for the Los Angeles Times living in Seoul, but she was a correspondent on both of the Koreas, so she did have to keep up to date on what was happening in North Korea and things like that. and she gets the idea that she's going to interview North Korean defectors from a specific city to get an idea of life in North Korea, like ordinary lives. And she doesn't want to do Pyongyang, the capital, because that's where all the like really privileged people go. Like you have to get special permission to live in Pyongyang, and the government doesn't let anyone that it like disapproves of in any way into Pyongyang. It's kind of like a show city to show the rest of the world how great North Korea is, and is not reality. So she chooses Chongjin, which is a northern city that used to be very industrialized, obviously not so much anymore. Follows the lives of 6 North Korean citizens over 15 years. And it says 6 on the back, but it's definitely more than 6 because you get a lot of their like families and stuff too. I will admit at times I'm so bad with like character names when I read books, like fictional books. I can never, if I watch a movie, I can never remember the characters' names afterwards. That never sticks with me. I'm terrible with people's names in real life when I meet them. If I meet someone once and then I meet them the second time, I'm never gonna remember what their name was. So I definitely got the people confused. I was good for the most part, but there were 2 women in particular who I don't know if they were actually around the same age, because this does cover like 15 years, and so everyone ages, but they start off relatively like they're like young lives are described into their adult years, and so I got really confused between the 2 of them especially, but I did start to sort that out. And then their moms, because their moms are both also focused on, one more than the other. Couldn't remember which mom went with which woman, so that was a little confusing for me at times, but that's my own fault because I'm terrible with names. But as you can see, it got a National Book Award finalist, and it's a really, really great book. It's not quite as personal as this one because this is written, even though this is like through a translator, it's written by the person who experienced it, whereas this is written by someone else. But I do think it does a really good job of kind of showing a lot of different North Korean lives, and the lives of people who are much less privileged than the author of this book, who's so high up in party and he lives in Pyongyang. And these people all live outside of Pyongyang. Most of the people aren't party members because you have to like be so favored by the government to be party members, and so they have different levels of status, the people that she interviews and whatnot, but they're all much lower than Jang Jin-sung is. So I really liked the multitude of perspectives that these 2 books provide together. And I don't know if I said that I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, but I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. There is the Erasmus Reader, which is edited by Erica Rummel. I did not rate this because it's like a collection of writings by Erasmus, and I don't always rate things like this because it's really hard for me to rate things like this. Like, I don't know if I'm rating the edition itself, like how well it's put together, or like the original writings by Erasmus or whatnot, so I did not rate this. That's it for books that I've actually finished reading at the time that I'm filming this, but there's one other book. I'm reading 2 books right now, but there's one of them that I know I'm going to be finished with. The other one I'm pretty positive I'm not going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and include this, which is Arab and Jew Wounded Spirits in the Promised Land by David K. Shipler, which is a huge book. And I have read it in a pretty short period of time for how big it is. I feel like I've been doing nothing but reading this the past couple days. As you can see, it won the Pulitzer Prize. This is a revised edition. It originally was published in the late 80s, I think, in 1987. This book won the Pulitzer Prize in 1987. So yeah, this is a revised edition. A lot of the chapters have like postscripts where it talks about this is how things have changed since the original was written, and it has footnotes giving more updated information and things like that. But it's a very, very in-depth look in the conflict in Israel and the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and all of that, and kind of the Arabs and the Jews and the like sources of the conflict, how it started, all of the like intricacies, kind of how each side views the other, and just everything. I feel like everything about the conflict is in here. It's almost definitely going to get 5 out of 5 stars. And now I'm going to go into the 5 books that I'm planning to read in January. Hopefully, since at the beginning of the month I'll still be on winter break, I'll be able to get more than 5 books read this month, but we'll see. I'm going to start off with the other book that I'm already reading, and the one that I definitely won't finish by the end of the month, and one that has been on my TBR the past couple of months, which is the Heath Anthology of American Literature, Volume D. I am much closer to being done with it, but will not finish in the last couple of days of December. Hopefully I can finish that in January. We'll see though. And then I'm going to start reading probably tomorrow, I don't think tonight, Poetics by Aristotle. I've read part of this book. It's a really short book. I've read part of this already for my Shakespeare class actually, because we talked about how Shakespeare used Aristotle's kind of views of poetry and poetics in his plays, but I'm gonna read the rest of this. And then I have Saint Anything by Sarah Dessen, which I got when it came out, and I got it at a signing, so it's signed. I had her sign I had her sign 3 books. I had her sign this one, which is the one that she was promoting on tour, and I had her sign the first one of her books that I ever bought, and then I had her sign my favorite of her books. So yeah, I got to meet her on the day that I got this, which was great and awesome, and she was really nice. But it came out not over the summer so much. I think it came out in May, because it was a week after school got out for me that the signing was. But this has gotten so much praise as her best book yet, and I haven't read it yet, and I really, really need to read it, obviously, and so I am going to actually make that happen in January. So then I will have read all of her books again. And I have Chasing Mona Lisa by Trisha Goyer and Mike Yorkie. I won this on Goodreads, and all I remember about it is it takes place towards the end of World War II in Paris, and there's this heist to try to steal the Mona Lisa, which doesn't sound like a book I would typically read so much. I really love historical fiction. I don't really read heist books. Those sorts of movies don't really usually interest me either, but I was thinking that maybe the combination of the historical sort of stuff would be very interesting for me. We'll see how I feel about it after I read it. And then another book that I believe I won from Goodreads, although I'd have to double check, is Household Workers Unite, The Untold Story of African American Women Who Built a Movement by Pramila Nadesan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And I mean, this is about household workers, Black domestic workers who contributed to the civil rights movement and everything that they did and things like that. And I really, really like this, both because it's about the civil rights movement, obviously, but specifically it's about women within the civil rights movement and Black women within the civil rights movement, which I think is great, considering sometimes the civil rights movement can become dominated by men, and sometimes the feminist movement can become dominated by white women. So it's great to have books like this, and I'm really, really excited to read this. So hopefully at the very least I get these books read in January, but I would really like to read more. But I will see you guys later. Bye.